Today I'm going to show you all the books that I'm reading for my second semester of my second year at university. This semester I'm studying Gothic and Horror, Romantic Writing, which kind of continues on from my 18th century class that I took last semester, and a media module which is something completely new to me, which is called Comedy, Culture and National Identity. I've got to be honest and say that I'm not really enjoying comedy that much. When I go to one of my literature kind of lectures, I always come away feeling like I've learnt something new, or maybe what I was feeling has been validated in that lecture, or I've been made excited about something, and that hasn't happened in comedy yet. Gothic and horror and romantic writing are two kind of genres, I guess, that I don't normally read a lot of, apart from if I'm studying them. They don't really appeal to me that much, but like with every module I've done at university, I've always kind of come away from the lectures and the seminars feeling completely passionate about what I've been studying that day. This piece of paper shows me every text I'm going to be reading that week, so I will be reading off this a little bit in this video. For romantic writing, pretty much all of the texts I've been studying have come out of my Norton Anthology of English Literature, the Romantic Period Volume D. In romantic writing, I have been studying Thomas Paine, The Rights of Man, Edmund Burke, Reflections on a Revolution in France, Mary Wollstonecraft, The Vindication of the Rights of Man, which I did not, or the Rights of Men, which I did not know existed. I only know Mary Wollstonecraft from The Vindication of the Rights of Women, which I'm also studying. I feel like I need to do a really quick shout out to Mary Wollstonecraft because she's amazing, in my opinion. I love her. What's so great about Vindication of the Rights of Man is that it's basically done to Edmund Burke, and she criticises him, and it's kind of really patronising, and she's just phenomenal. It's just the way she directs the entire thing to Edmund Burke, and she just says things like, "The birthright of man, to give you, sir, a short definition of this disputed right," and she just describes it, and she's just fantastic. The majority of romantic writing is poetry, so I'm just going to list some poems now. Coleridge, The Lime Tree Bower, Clare, the Nightingale's Nest, which I absolutely love, Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey. This is not a poem, Dorothy Wordsworth Grassmere Journals. We've also been studying the poems of Helen Maria Williams and John Thelwall, and we've been reading Blake's poem London. Mary Robinson, who Critical Lit did a whole video about, which I'll link in the description. London Summer Morning and the Poet's Garret. Barbara's Washing Day, Shelley's Mont Blanc, Wordsworth's Prelude. We've been looking at different sections of the Prelude throughout the entire course. Byron's play Manfred. Barbara again, her name is actually Anna Letitia. I can never pronounce any of these people's name. I should really do more research before I start a video. Anyways, we've been reading Barbara's poem A Summer Evening's Meditation. Charlotte Smith's Elegiac, another thing I can never pronounce, elegy. Elegiac, I can't pronounce the word. So elegy sonnets, let's call them that. John Clare's I Am, which is one of my favourite poems. I really love Clare as a writer. I am, yet what I am no one cares or knows. What I found really fascinating about this poem is it's almost like the idea of self. If someone is an individual, their individuality and selfhood has to be almost given to them. It has to be validated by other people. And the idea that individuality has to be validated by someone else, and therefore you're not just an individual if you declare yourself an individual. You're an individual if other people see you as being an individual. And we looked at this when we kind of looked at the idea of what a romantic individual and romantic individuality, and I just loved it. I forgot to mention that alongside all this poetry, we've been looking at we always look at essays and kind of critics, but we've been looking at theories like the idea of the sublime. We looked at John Keats's letter to Richard Woodhouse, which has kind of been subtitled A Poet Has No Identity, and I really love this because if you kind of said this now, it would sound really pretentious, but John Keats just really gets away with it. A poet is the most unpoetical thing in existence because he has no identity. He is continually in for and filling some other body. We've been looking at slave and abolition, and we've been looking at writers such as John Newton, who is Amazing Grace, and kind of looking at that. One thing I really like is we actually kind of brought it into the contemporary, and we looked at Do They Know It's Christmas Time, and we looked at kind of, is it the Band-Aid song for kind of Ebola, and we looked at how Africa is presented as this one whole thing, and just how the Western view of Africa is just so wrong and like a very colonial kind of perspective on it. Thomas Clarkson's essay on the slavery and commerce of the human species, in particular looking at the dimension of a slave vessel and the Zong incident, which is the incident that is actually featured in the film Belle, which I think is a fantastic movie. It's incredible. There's the interesting narrative of Eloda Equiano or Gustav Vasa, the African written by himself. This really intrigued me because it focused on individuality and the idea of names, and how people would give people other names to almost strip away their identity, and how Equiano brings back his individuality and declares him an individual, especially by saying that this text was written by himself, which when I studied American literature I remember seeing quite a lot in slave narratives as a declaration of freedom, and I always find that really quite powerful to read. We've also been studying dark romanticism and the Gothic in romantic writing with Walpole's The Castle of Otranto, Radcliffe, The Mysteries of Udolpho, and Lewis's The Monk. And then moving on to romantic sensibilities, we are studying Elizabeth Inchbald's play Lover's Vows, which is the play that is featured in Jane Austen's Mansfield Park. And then the last text that I'm going to be studying for romantic is Mansfield Park by Jane Austen, which is a Jane Austen that I've never read before. I've honestly never been that intrigued by Mansfield Park. I don't know the story, but I do know that Ron from Ron Lit loves Mansfield Park and it's her favourite Jane Austen novel. Now for Gothic and horror, Anne Radcliffe's On Supernatural Poetry, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which is one of my favourite poems. I love it. Never kill an albatross. It's not a good idea. Trust me. Whistle and I'll Come to You, I loved. I'll actually put a link to it in the description. It's on YouTube now. It's a BBC kind of TV film, and I absolutely loved it, and it's based on a book or short story. Dracula by Bram Stoker, a story about cultural anxieties from sexually active women to immigration. I was fascinated by the fact that actually Dracula isn't in much of this novel, and there's a lot of fainting, which is not a surprise, to be honest, but very interesting portrayals of sex, in particular oral sex. And I know it's not sex, but it basically is sex. Flannery O'Connor's short story A Good Man Is Hard to Find. Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. This edition also includes Daisy Miller, which I really want to read as well. One of my favourite films of all time, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. You will have noticed a slight background change. I am now back in Birmingham, I'm no longer in Yorkshire, I'm home for Easter, and when I go back to university I only have 3 weeks left of my term, which is ridiculous. The reason that you see me now with this background is because I've been sitting editing this video and I suddenly realised that I didn't end it. I didn't say goodbye, I just stopped recording, which is a typical me thing to do. I also want to point out at the beginning of this video I said these are all the texts I've been studying for this semester. That's not true. While I've been editing I've actually cut out loads of texts just because it was just me reading off a piece of paper, so the texts I'm including in this video are kind of like the highlights of this semester. I'm now going to finally end this video by saying thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you've read any of the texts that I mentioned, please let me know in the comments.